Have you learned with time to advocate more for yourself and for your babies with medical providers and with family members and with friends so that you and your babies get the care and support that you need? This week, my guest, Lindsay, shares a story of how that evolution really happened with her. She shares a story of learning to recognize how to provide the support that she and her family needed to have the best breastfeeding outcomes they possibly could. And an interesting part of her story is that her husband comes from a culture where everybody just breastfed. And so having him on her side to know that she could do it, that her body could feed her babies, really helped, even when circumstances were a little bit frustrating, when healthcare providers were pushing her to feed in other ways or might have caused a little bit of extra stress when milk wasn't coming in on their timelines. So listen to this empowering story of a person stepping into their own power to feed her babies in the way that was right for her. Enjoy. When I began breastfeeding, I was blindsided by how difficult it was. Having known only a handful of people who had ever done it and only seeing it up close a couple of times, I had a huge learning curve. Since then, I've become a doula, a childbirth educator, and an internationally board-certified lactation consultant, or an IBCLC. I'm your host, Lo Nigrosh, and I welcome you to the Milk Making Minutes, where we explore the systemic, medical, and cultural barriers that make feeding our babies so difficult, so that you know your baby feeding struggles are not your fault, and your triumphs really are the miracles you feel they are.
I am Lindsay Sarwanja. I am a mom of 3. I have a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 10-week-old. So we are a busy household, and I am with my husband, Mike, that we've been together. We're having our 6-year anniversary coming up. So that is really exciting too.
Yes. And you have a pretty busy Instagram account. I don't know if you have other accounts that are pretty big.
I'm actively working on trying to grow them. So I'm really into helping new moms and pregnant women to just find their voice and be a support to them, because I feel like there's a lot of people just kind of just go with the flow and they don't realize that they are empowered to ask their own questions and be their own support system. So that's kind of where my platform stems off of. And then I also work using Amari products to help support new moms and moms in general and pregnant moms with their mental wellness. It's a mental wellness company using some supplements to support your gut-brain axis. So I really enjoy to help people through those periods and really feel their best and not feel like they're in overwhelm and in a state of just like low, like I feel like feeling like we're not at our best selves, and just getting back to feeling like we have the energy, the motivation, the drive, removing the brain fog, all those things that kind of come with motherhood. So
Yeah. So you show your beautiful children there on Instagram, which is how I got connected to you. And you were pregnant with your third when I started following you, and your third came at how many weeks gestation?
Ooh, she was 41 in 6 days.
Okay,
so she definitely
yeah.
took her time and waited the last moment. And I didn't think it was going to be that way, because my first started labor right at 40. My second came at 36 weeks. So I was like, oh, this is going to be like right in between. I was like preparing to go in labor, like probably like 38, 39. No, she made me wait till the last minute.
They say those third babies are wild cards. Turned out to be the case for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I loved your attitude about the whole thing, at least on Instagram. You seemed pretty authentic about it, but just, this baby's going to come when this baby comes, and we're just going to do what we can to bide our time and maintain our sanity. And
Yeah, I was definitely trying to trust my body and put my own mindfulness into practice because my first was a natural birth, but with an epidural. My second one was a C-section because of the vasoprevia condition I had. And then this one was a VBAC, unmedicated water birth at a birth center.
Mm.
So I was really kind of like, I've done it all. And I really
Mhm.
wanted to push myself to see if I could do it. And it was an amazing experience. I 100% recommend it. You just have to work on your mindset and prepare yourself for it. And that's where I was trying to put that into practice to make sure that I let her come on her own time, minimizing interventions. And she did. And it was an amazing experience because of it.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to hear how that impacted your baby feeding experiences. But before we get into that, I want to take you way back to your childhood, to your earliest memories, to your cultural upbringing, and have you think about what your exposure to baby feeding and breastfeeding was. Did you see people breastfeeding? Was it talked about when they were breastfeeding? Was it out in open? Was it under a cover? When you had baby dolls or pretended with your babies? Was that with a bottle? Tell me a little bit about your cultural upbringing and your exposure to breastfeeding.
I personally was breastfed till 6 months, as
Mhm.
well as my sisters, which I guess was kind of out of the norm for my mom and her upbringing. Like, it wasn't necessarily encouraged. None of her sisters breastfed. So it was definitely like she kind of broke out of the norm. But my memories of growing up, I don't remember seeing anyone else breastfeed. I was the youngest, so like it's not like more children were breastfed after me. Like I remember playing with my dolls and definitely using more of a bottle. Like I don't think I ever like pretended to bring them to my breasts. However, my husband is actually from Uganda. So
Mm.
they come from a culture that's pretty much your only option. I mean, yes, now more so there's probably more feeding and there's been more introduction of formula there and it is a lifesaver when you need it. But he is one of six, and they were all breastfed. Personally, too, I love breastfeeding because it saves a lot of money. Like, how much money do we have to spend on formula just because it is? It's just an added expense. So that the time and the money was a huge factor for me there too to add it in.
Yeah, that's interesting. So your husband grew up in Uganda, and was he surrounded by breastfeeding as a child and a teenager?
Yeah, I would definitely say so because he has siblings that are 10 years younger than him. So he saw breastfeeding. I mean, his mom was also the oldest of like 12. So there was lots of like exposure to that, especially like his aunts. I'm pretty sure like that it was common for him to see, which is also why he's been a huge support to me, an
Mhm.
encouragement to just continue on. And when I had expressed that that was my desire to breastfeed and to seek support and get him involved in the process, he was 100% there with me to know that this is what we want to do and we can accomplish it.
What a difference that can make.
Because from our cultural point of view here, formula is like it's highly encouraged and breastfeeding takes work. It takes support. It takes knowledge. Like one of the ways that I like to think about it too, it's like riding a bike or driving a car. You can have all the knowledge come in, but until you get there and try it for yourself and fall off or bump into things or stop short a few times, you're not gonna get it. You still have to practice. It's not gonna just come to you. And I think a lot of people just assume like, yeah, put a baby on your boob and they just eat. And it's not necessarily that case. So you have to continue to work on it and find your groove, break out the kinks and continue to work on it. So
Mhm.
with him too, we went to like when I was pregnant the first time, I had actually been listening to a lot of podcasts and listening to like how I wanted my birth to go, kind of breaking out from like, oh, okay, this is just going to be in a hospital with an epidural and a C-section and like all the kind of standard things that they push towards you. And I was learning about all the different ways that I could try to be more natural and let my body do what it's actually supposed to do. And along with that came breastfeeding and learning about the golden hour and the birth crawl, and knowing that that was something that I really wanted to do. So we did take not only in like a newborn or childbirth education class, but we took a breastfeeding class to kind of learn some more of those things. And from there, we also learn like, have your lactation consultant on speed dial. Like the moment you feel like you need something, like have it at your husband's fingertips so that they can call, because you may just be in this feeling of overwhelm and hormonal ups and downs, and you just don't know what's happening. And with our first child, he was like borderline colic. We didn't realize that he had a intolerance to dairy for the first 4 months of his life. So he was very much like screaming all the time, spitting up, just very uncomfortable. And we had no idea why. It was first time parents. And so it was really hard to just be in that state of new parents, hormonal overwhelm, screaming baby all the time that doesn't want to sleep and only wants to be on you. So having a lactation consultant on speed dial and my husband called right away was like huge, because I think too, what I experienced when I was in the hospital was that although it was great to have their support there, the lactation consultants that came in for 15 minutes weren't very helpful. They just kind of like, they didn't give you good information. And their first reaction is to give you the nipple shield. And so then I had to fight with that for a little bit. And since even in the past, like I would say almost 2 weeks, I've heard like 5 different moms being like, oh yeah, they pushed the nipple shield on me right away in the hospital. And I'm like, why do they do that? Like instead of like actually supporting you to get a good latch and breastfeed on your own, because then you have to transition out. Or we were talking too about like, I mean, when you're out in public and you're trying to breastfeed and you have to then finagle with a nipple shield first and then try to get a newborn to latch, it's difficult, and you don't feel like you have that support to go out and like be around other people because you're still trying to figure this all out.
It is so challenging. And there are so many systemic barriers or systemic problems that lead to that distribution of the nipple shield before you even get there, like pressure to have the babies feeding right away in the hospital system, like not letting things just kind of play out, like being so worried about the weight loss, even though IV fluids can cause an inflation in that birth weight. And so, it's probably not that the baby has had a 10% weight loss, but then there's this pressure to get milk into the baby. And so then the nurses are like, well, try a nipple shield, or the lactation consultants are like, well, try a nipple shield. So there are so many systemic problems in hospital systems that lead to this distribution of the nipple shield. And then once it's distributed, patients are not being told, hey, this is a temporary solution. Here's contact information for somebody outside of this hospital system that you should be working with so that you can wean off of this nipple shield. We're just giving it to you now because we don't have the tools or the time to help you feed your baby right now. And so we want you to be able to feed your baby with breast milk. And this is like the best we can do in this moment. Like if that's the only tool they have in the moment, it's better than nothing. But let's have an honest conversation and let's say, hey, we don't have the capacity to help you right now. If you think a nipple shield would help you, go ahead and use it. And you really need to schedule a follow-up appointment with somebody. And here's the name of somebody we think is really good in your community.
I think that's huge. The follow-up part would be 100% so helpful for so many women, because like you're saying, our bodies, like for most women, our milk doesn't come in until like 4 days later. You're not in the hospital for 4 days. How do they expect your milk to come in at that point? And you're only supposed to be producing colostrum at that time. Your colostrum is so little. The baby's stomach is so little when it starts that like you're not supposed to be like putting all this milk into them because they don't have the capacity to hold it. Like, and you brought up a good point too. Like, and that was one of the reasons why I wanted to try a natural birth after my other experiences too, because when you get that epidural, it means you're getting hooked up to IV fluids. You can't walk. It's going to increase the weight and the weight loss. And I did have I had an experience when I was in the hospital with my first that we were just about to get discharged and he started like the shakes, as they called it, because they said he had low blood sugar. And I really questioned, like, what did people do before they had all these modern medicine? Like, you just had to let your baby get the milk coming in. But I do understand, like, they are trying to cover their bases there. So they introduced the sugar water and made me give him some of that for extra monitoring. Of course, we had to stay an extra day because of it, which also makes me question, like, do they just do that so that they can get more money? That's here nor there, but then they said I needed to supplement with formula. And that was like one of my biggest, like, really didn't want to do it. And so we did, I think it's the brain acronym, where we like basically like asked all the questions. Couldn't we wait? What are the alternatives? I wish I could remember that off the top of my head. Maybe it's not brain, but like basically pushing back to say, like, let's hold on, like, let's discuss this. And we were trying to figure out the alternatives. The other alternatives was to give him IV fluids, which I didn't want to do that either because he was a newborn baby.
Yeah. The brain acronym is benefits, risk, alternatives, intuition, nothing.
Yeah. And so we were trying to figure those alternatives. And then what we ended up coming down to was using, and this maybe could have been how the nipple shield was introduced, because I wanted to stimulate my breast at the same time to encourage the milk to come in. So they put like the milk on a clip up here with a little tube that fed in through the nipple shield so that they were still stimulating my breast by taking in the formula. And they made me do that for, I think, at least 4 to 8 hours after I left the hospital. And then I was determined. I was like, we're not doing this. Like, my milk came in, he was getting like enough. We had to do the weight checkups at the pediatrician. He was gaining weight. I was like, this formula's out of here. And I like kicked it to the curb. And then we really worked on removing the nipple shield after that too, because it wasn't something that I wanted to continue in my practice because it was also just burdensome.
Yeah, that can be so hard because you want to trust that the providers, that they have your and your baby's best interest in mind, and that what they are recommending is really what's good for you and for your baby. And you also don't want to tamper or push down your own intuition. And so sometimes it feels like those two things are at odds. But when your own expertise, you haven't learned enough about it. By the time you get to your third child, you're like, nah, I'll be okay. But, especially if it's a first child, you really sometimes don't know what to do. And sometimes in these situations, it is better to be safe than sorry. And that's where this fear tactic comes in, is they know that we'd all rather be safe than sorry when it comes to the health of our babies. And so they play this statistic game with us. And so they see signs and then they tell us what the risks are. And sometimes the risks are very minimal, but they're not telling us the actual percentages of the risks.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I feel like you don't know what you don't know. So that's why I feel like I try to encourage women to, especially when it comes to pregnancy, to like start to research some of these things ahead of time. I know so many women are like, I just don't want to know because like, I don't want to get in my head about it, or they don't put in as much effort into researching your birth and how you want that to go as you are going to be putting into your registry. Like, how many of us spend so much time analyzing the crib we want and the best bouncer and the
monitor.
All these things, but we didn't actually put that same effort into our birth experiences, which directly correlate to how our breastfeeding experience goes.
Mm-hmm. And our postpartum, like our long postpartum experience. Yeah.
Because you even think about it too, like when we are coming off of an epidural or a C-section, we have all these medications in us and like can put a lot of distress on the baby if they had Pitocin, and that could cause difficulties with breastfeeding too. There's just so many factors that through the actual childbirth experience factor into that first few days with breastfeeding.
Yeah, which can have a long-term impact over the course of your breastfeeding journey. Last night, as a family, we had the rare opportunity to just have one child at home. We had not eaten dinner yet, and it was getting pretty late, but we asked him, "It's just the three of us. What would you like to do?" And my son said he wanted to take a walk at a nearby reservoir. And neither my husband and I were stressed out about this because we had a refrigerator full of Feast and Fettle, which had delivered home cooked meals right to our front door that we knew when we came home from our walk, all we would have to do was just heat and serve it. So off we went on our walk right around sunset, around the reservoir. It was beautiful, just the three of us and our dog. And then we came home, and within 15 minutes, we had the most delicious coconut crusted cod and roasted cauliflower. And we ate it while we played Uno together. And the cleanup was so easy. And it made our evening so amazing after a full day of work and allowed us to connect with our child. And this is why I am so happy that Feast and Fettle is a partner of the podcast, because I truly believe that anything that allows families to spend more time together and less time worrying about all the things they need to do, like getting dinner on the table, is something I can get behind. So if you would like to see what Feast and Fettle can do for your family, go to feastandfettle.com and use my code MILK to get $30 off your first week's order. And let somebody else do the cooking for you and just go take that walk. If you want to have less anxiety and more confidence so that your parenting journey can feel like you always wanted it to feel, then go to my website right now so that you can have a person by your side who not only knows how you feel, but who combines my expertise of lactation with your expertise of your body and your baby to help you make the next right step in your lactation journey, because that's all you really need to do is make the next right step. And right now, that next right step is going to my website, www.quavinbirthservices.com. And I can't wait to see your name pop up in my inbox or on my phone, on my text messages. Talk to you soon. As you said, it's important to have an out-of-hospital lactation consultant on speed dial, because if a situation like this arises and you need to call or text them, you can get somebody to help you navigate these situations, because sometimes the in-hospital lactation consultant is navigating a political situation within the hospital system. So like I work at a hospital 2 days a month. However, the way I work within the hospital system is very different than the way I work in my private practice, because I am working within a political system and I know where my limits are there. So I do the best I can given that system with every patient I see. But there are certain things I just cannot talk about because I will get in trouble if I talk about them. You know, I can't go against what a doctor or a pediatrician has said, even if I disagree with them, because I won't keep my job there. So I have to navigate these conversations very, very carefully. Now, I can provide information to a patient and I can say, you know, here's some information about this topic if you would like to go back to the provider, which is what I do in my private practice as well. I have to stay within my scope, but I can be a little bolder. You know, I can have more direct conversations with people in my private practice, whereas in the hospital system, even really good lactation consultants, their tongues are a little tied. However, if a person has only done hospital care, they might not even be privy to some of the more up-to-date information if they have only worked within that system.
Yeah, I completely see where you're coming from there. And I think that goes from all the providers too. Like they only are pushing out information that they know, that they
Right.
have been told. And you really have to know what matters to you and be willing to
Exactly.
push back.
Yeah. I tell all of my clients, I just sent out client notes today for a consult I had yesterday, and we did a consult about weaning. And I said to her in person, and I said in the note, just a reminder, this is your decision to make. You are the expert here about your body. You know your baby best. If at any point, anything we talk about is not sitting well with you, if we are moving in a direction that does not feel right, I want you to tell me. If you need to say to me, we need to get more creative here. This isn't working for me. I don't like this approach. I want to know, because you are the person who has to implement what we're talking about, not me. If you can't say that to whatever provider you are talking to, they're not doing their job, because you have hired that person to support you and your family.
I think we forget that we are actually paying them.
Right.
And that
Yeah.
they have to like support us versus the other way around, especially in the hospital setting, because it's, you said it, they say things so matter of fact and give you so many statistics or things in the skewed in the direction that they want you to go, rather than like, I even look at a VBAC. Yes, it has its risks, but if you look at the risks the other way of having repeat cesarean sections, that has a whole realm of risks too. And when I looked at those statistics, I was like, this realm of statistics is over here, but having a VBAC is only this much. I was like, I'm willing to take that risk, despite what other would help, like other professionals would have told me.
Yeah. So you had this blood sugar issue, and then you, even when you went home, you needed to continue the formula, but after a couple of days, you were able to suspend that. And then did things go pretty smoothly from there with your first, or did you continue to have hiccups?
I think it was a huge learning curve for sure. I generally have an oversupply at the beginning, which is a blessing. Like I guess I'd rather have an oversupply than an undersupply, but like that caused issues as far as on top of the dairy intolerance, he was like kind of gagging and choking because it comes out so fast. I have a fast letdown. So we definitely did have some struggles on top of having a lactation consultant come in the first few days, which was so helpful to like just try all the positions, sit with me for 2 hours, looking at latch, going over information. So valuable. I continued to go to a breastfeeding support group every week, which was a whole lot easier when you just had one kid.
Yes.
But honestly, it was one of the best things. I found such community there to be around like-minded women. There was a lactation consultant there that would work with you, that would come look at your latch. They would bring the scale. You could do like weighted feeds and just like kind of talking out every scenario. Cause I feel like that first baby, when I was in my head in the middle of the night, I was racing through like, oh, what about this? And what about that? And like trying to like figure everything out, because I'm like, okay, I need to change sides. I need to make sure I'm like tracking every hour that I'm feeding, and like just being very kind of methodical with it rather than just kind of going with the flow. But that's how I did it for the first one. And then, so with the dairy intolerance, which I know now too, that it could be more than that, like there could be other factors. But for that, I decided to take out dairy from my diet. And it was kind of that decision of, well, if it will make my life easier because my baby is happier, I'm going to go for it. I know a lot of people, like, they're like, yeah, no, I give up at that point, and they just look for the dairy-free milk. But I adjusted my lifestyle for it. And honestly, it helped me because I was so intentional with what I was eating, because it's in so much processed food too, that it helped me like shed off that baby weight too, which was an added bonus. So I was being like still taking in my intake of my necessary foods, but in a much more intentional way. And then around 4 months, we actually ended up taking our son to Uganda.
Oh, wow.
So that was an exciting and overwhelming experience, because I feel like I was prepping for that trip in my mind before he was even born, because I was like, just bringing a newborn into or a young baby into like a place that you don't have access to the same things you would here. I traveled with my pump at wherever I went because I was like, what happens if I fall sick and I can't breastfeed my baby? Like, I was like, at least I can pump and give him the milk. So I had my nice big Spectra like on the plane with me wherever I went, which was cumbersome, but it worked. Luckily, I never had to use it. But overall, I think once we kind of got to a good spot, we just kind of went off running, and it was a good experience. I nursed with him for probably about 22 months because I had my second son at 24 months. So,
oh, wow.
my first two, fun fact, actually have the same exact birthday.
No way. That's amazing.
It wasn't at all planned that way. Like, he was born 36 weeks and I had a scheduled C-section for 2 days after his brother's birthday, and my water broke on his brother's birthday. So he decided he wanted the same birthday.
Wow. That is so cool. Do they like having the same birthday?
At this point, they don't really notice the difference, I don't think.
They're still pretty young.
We also have a lot of family birthdays in the same time, so we do a lot of joint parties.
Wow, that's really neat. Okay, so you nursed all the way through your pregnancy. Did you have any difficulty? Was it painful at all?
So painful. Like, I don't think there was a lot of times that I was like so close to giving up because I'm just like, it hurts so bad. Like, it hurt more breastfeeding during pregnancy than it did like during those first few weeks.
Yeah. Why did you continue?
You know what? I think it brought us a bond. It was like that feeling of closeness, like just laying down with him and putting him to sleep, like, and getting his milk. And because he had the dairy allergy, I wasn't looking to really introduce like milk into the scenario. So if I could get him to 2 years, then like we could kind of like skip over that part.
And I'm not asking why judgmentally, because
no, but
I totally get it. Yeah.
I just wanted to continue. Like, I wanted to get to that mark. And so through that pregnancy, I generally have very difficult pregnancies too, like very like sick all the time. And with that pregnancy, I actually had to go into the hospital starting at 32 weeks, the condition. So I didn't even have the option to continue breastfeeding. I had to wean him at that point because I was going to be in isolation in the hospital in the middle of COVID. And because he was so like upset and like crying all the time, I ended up bed sharing, and that was not something I planned to do when I was pregnant or before having kids. I'm like, oh yeah, they're going to sleep in their cribs. Yeah, no, that kind of went out the window pretty quickly. So my kids so far have like bed shared and nursed throughout the night, always had access to milk when they needed it. So that was a factor that like we were always just so close. And then starting at 6 months, before I even get there, with my first, I went back to work for one day after maternity leave, and I was like, I can't do this. I was commuting into the city. I had like an hour and a half commute each way, and I was like, not happening. And so I went in for that one day and I quit.
Wow.
Luckily, we had the bandwidth at that time to work, to let me be home. And honestly, it was one of the best decisions I made, but also led me in the direction of why I wanted to start my own business so I could be home with my kids and still utilize my skills while serving them not serving them, like watching them grow at the same time. So I got to stay home with him. And then around the 6-month mark, I decided to pick up a contract. So I had like a 4-month contract and I still had to drive into the city. Luckily, my husband was able to stay home to that time. So we kind of switched off. So I also had to pump while at work and commuting, which was a whole nother experience of making sure you have enough milk to bring home, and like finding that time in the day at work to find your space to pump and keeping up your supply.
And were you an independent contractor at the time, or were you?
I was a contract worker. I was actually covering for someone else's maternity leave.
Oh, okay.
Which was nice to know that I kind of had a strict deadline, but also allowed us to supplement our income while my husband was home.
And did you have a space where you could pump in?
So yes, the company did have a space. I had to go to like another floor and you had to book the room in advance because they had one room for the whole building for all women, which made it difficult. But they did have like a little, like a seat and a sink and a fridge so you could put your supplies in there, which was nice. But it was kind of difficult trying to find your schedule because if you were working around other pumping moms, like wasn't always available when you needed it. And then you would have like someone overschedule you a meeting and just is not always conducive to moms. I saw another mom in the office and she was like a permanent full-time, like higher role. So she kind of had a more like say and leeway, but she had, and at that time I didn't even know it existed, the pumps that just sat, I think she had like an LV or something that sat into your cup. So she would be walking around the office with her nursing cups, like pumping while you didn't even know she was in a meeting, which was kind of funny.
So you did that for 4 months, you said?
Yeah. And it was always a fun experience too, because one of my pump sessions was always right at the end of the day. So I'd do it on my commute home while I was driving. Maybe
With
not
the Spectra? Like an S1?
Yeah, it was the rechargeable one so that I could take it portably, but I always was driving and I feel like if someone would look over and see that I had these flanges hanging out of my breast.
Right. Yeah. I would love to talk to a truck driver one time and see how many, like get somebody to count in a month's time, how many pumping moms they see on the road. Okay, so you quit one day after maternity leave, but then did have that out of the home working experience for that amount of time when you took that contract. And was it hard to maintain your milk supply through pumping, or you had enough milk that it was fine? You said you were kind of an oversupplier.
Yeah, I think I was able to supply enough to feed him for the next day. And then generally from the beginning, I did have a little bit of milk collected beforehand just in case. But then I was also such a stickler where I was like, no, you have to give him this bottle and make sure he eats it all because like I'm not wasting any milk here. You can't just like willy-nilly with the milk situation. It's like it's such a game where you have to like pump enough to feed enough. And if they don't take it, it's like, but since like for my second and third, I realized the Haka was super helpful for me as a oversupplier to collect some milk to create a stash before I got into a situation where I needed to be away. So that has been a super helpful tool for me. And I was going to say too, for my second and third, I had the Silverette nursing cups. Those were two products that I loved to. The Silverettes definitely help reduce any like pain and heal itself with those first few weeks of nursing.
Yeah, just the Silverettes that you put on your nipples to kind of help with any pain that you're feeling from getting the latch adjusted.
Yeah, and then they can collect your milk in it. So it's like it's a self-soothing system where you're
it's a cup. Okay.
Yeah. So have you ever seen them?
No.
So it's like it's pure silver. So the silver actually heals your nipples. And then it's like about round and it like just fits over your nipple in your areola. And so like if you're obviously leaking a little bit, it leaks into the cup and then the milk kind of sits there. So it's like healing your own nipple back at the same time instead of like going into an absorbent pad. And it just helps it kind of like stay like it with my third, I never like had any issues with like cracked or painful nipples because of them. It was, they were great.
Okay. So then fast forward, second baby's born at about, actually not about, when your baby is exactly 2 years old and had been weaned for 2 months.
Yep.
Was weaning difficult for him or there was not as much milk? And so
we just did it gradually, I would say. I think I started because we needed to wean at night, which was the first step. And I think I tried to just do the method of like rolling over and like not like making it as accessible because we were bed sharing. I responded less instead of just like offering it up, being like, no, you're fine. Like, so we were able to wean at night, like, and I think I started the process probably like maybe like 3 or 4 months it took to like completely to wean, and then just stopped offering it a little bit more during the day for like every every option that they wanted, especially because I love to do it when they fall. And it's like, oh, here, you need some comfort.
Right. Right. Yeah. To
And then
create a few more tools for your toolbox.
Yep. And then we were down to like morning, nap time, dinner, or like before bed. And then we had to eventually do the switch of like my husband putting him to bed in a different space so that he would stop associating it with the wean. It did go fairly smoothly. He didn't love being in his own space, and that only lasted for a few hours of the night, but at least it did make for a relatively smooth transition.
It is sometimes the case when you have been nursing a toddler who, can basically attach themselves and they're kind of in charge of their own nursing. When you then go back to nursing a newborn, it can feel really different. Like they can't hold their own head up. You're having to help them a lot more. So what did that feel like to transition from this child who could basically nurse themselves to having a newborn again? Was that transition difficult, or were you able to kind of pick it up quickly?
I feel like I was able to pick it up quicker. I was definitely more confident in knowing that I had the milk supply, and that even if it wasn't coming in while I was still in the hospital, it was okay. Like, they did have me pumping in the hospital because he was premature. That was like the question of like, oh, will he have enough milk? So they're like, oh, why don't you start pumping? And of course, you're post C-section, so you can't even get up to like wash your bottles, or like it was just even more cumbersome. And I don't think I necessarily needed it. My milk came in on day 2. It came in really quickly because like I barely had any break in between. And again, I had an oversupply. He like had to deal with a fast letdown and kind of choking on that. But I was lucky enough that he didn't need any NICU time, and he was healthy and strong and didn't have any blood sugar issues because the milk came in before we left the hospital. I think it was an adjustment trying to remember and like just like being in positions where you're not just kind of like hanging out like, oh, you can do what you want. You have to be intentional with like cupping and holding and changing to like football hold or cross cradle, because you like need to like really make sure that their latch is intentional. And I don't like to do like bed sharing or nighttime laying down feeding with the newborns, because I learned the hard way that that's when my latch gets off and I get those cracked and bleeding nipples because I was half asleep and wasn't paying attention to how he was like latching on there.
Yeah, that's a good point, that sometimes, especially when we go into it feeling like we're going to bed share, that we have to remember that it takes a little bit of time to really, even if we know what we're doing, the baby doesn't. And so it does take some time to get baby really learning how much breast tissue they need to transfer a good amount of milk.
I feel like we learned so much with our first, like even being evaluated for tongue tie. Like when we are having so many issues with the digestion, we got him assessed at a pediatric dentist, and they did claim he had a tongue tie and they wanted to do the laser. But at that point, he was 4 months old. He was growing. He was taking milk well, that we're like, it's not worth having the procedure because he's thriving. But like that idea of like, okay, what to look out for? Is it the latch? Is it the tongue tie or the lip ties or all those things? At least I had an awareness of it.
Yeah, because sometimes, and I'll post a link to this in the show notes for anyone who's interested, sometimes when people are concerned about food intolerances, it could be tongue tie, which you did go and get evaluated for that. It could also be oversupply. Sometimes when you have a fussy baby who is constantly seeming hungry, is constantly crying, they want to go to the breast frequently, the cause can be oversupply. And you think, well, why are they constantly hungry? And there are some reasons for that, which I am not going to take the time to go over now because I have a whole episode about that. But when there is blood in the stool, that is a good indication that it actually is the intolerance. And if it's something like dairy and you don't mind eliminating dairy to see if it's going to help, and then it helps, great. Then you know that that's what it is. But if you eliminate the dairy and baby still has all the symptoms and you're like, gosh, man, I've eliminated dairy and baby's still so fussy, then you might be thinking, well, what are some of the other causes? What could it be? Especially if there's not
And
blood in the stool, because that's really the thing that helps us know.
And what's interesting is that with my second, I didn't have any intolerances. He was fine. He nursed fine. It was mid-pandemic, so we were home. Like, I barely needed to pump, or like, I did have a couple work trips scheduled, so I needed to build up a supply to make sure that he had some milk while I was gone, which happened around, like, I think 9 months, and then like maybe 18 months. By 18 months, he refused the bottle. So I'm trying to be intentional with this third one to introduce a bottle and train with the bottle ahead of time, because I do know that I have a bachelorette party coming up this summer that I can't be around for. So she needs to be able to take that bottle. And I've collected some milk in the freezer for my oversupply, which is nice. And I know that I have it. But with her, I again found out that she has a dairy intolerance, and we found that out pretty quick because I knew what to look for, and we tested the stool at her like 5-week appointment. So I've been able to adjust my eating for her, but I still have over 100 ounces of stored milk that are not dairy free.
Oh no. What are you going to do with it?
I don't know. We'll see, because I still need to be away and she still needs the milk. So I'll probably have them work backwards. Like, if I have any milk first that has like that is dairy free, or kind of mix it in with the dairy milk, so that there's not too much dairy in the milk while I'm away. And hopefully that will help. Otherwise, hopefully she's also old enough by then. Like, I think she'll be like 4 or 5 months, that she has a little bit more tolerance and her stomach can handle it a little better.
What are the signs that you noticed before you tested the stool to help you know that she had a dairy intolerance?
She was actually fine for like the first 4 weeks. And then like around the 5-week mark, she started to have more, like, her stools were kind of like, they almost like stringy, almost like hard to pull apart. She was like so squirmy, like just almost like convulsing in a sense, like after she would nurse. She was like spitting it up. Like, when I tried to lay her down, when she was a pretty good sleeper, she was just constantly like squirming and uncomfortable, that I was like, something's not right. There's something bothering you at this point. And once I did cut out the dairy, she went back to normal. I'm trying to be pretty strict about it, but of course there's things that sneak in there too. And I don't think when it's in like smaller quantities, it seems to bother her as much.
Was there anything that you noticed, given that you had such a different birth experience for her? Was there anything you noticed in the very beginning about the differences and how the beginning of her breastfeeding experience went versus your other two kids?
I mean, she latched on very easily. She was very alert and wanting milk right away. She was sleeping good too. So like that, I think, helped to regulate like the digestion stuff. She obviously also got an oversupply, so she was like, sometimes has the choking because the letdown's coming at her fast. But I think it just helps her be more like not as lethargic, and like easier to be there to like latch and wake up. Because I remember my second son, who was premature and had the C-section, he was just so sleepy, like like you had to like almost like force it on him,
right?
For the first few weeks. And like even with my third, she's a great sleeper, but I think also because she's like her stomach had time to process and like grow into what it was from the beginning, she's absorbing and taking in that milk better during the day and during when she's eating. So then she's sleeping longer stretches at night, which I'm here for.
Right? I know. Yeah, exactly. Is there anything else that you want to share? I think those first journeys are often the ones where we learn the most as moms, as parents.
I did contemplate with my second to third tandem nursing.
Mm.
And like whether or not I would bring him back on to nurse after the baby was born. We had a similar kind of weaning experience as the first. Like we kind of gradually did it overnight and then broke off during the day. And I think his last feed was like during a nap, before a nap, like 2 weeks before she was born. So he was much closer to like reaching the end to the pregnancy with me. And I do have share my birth story on my social media pages. So if you want to see how that birth went, go check that out. Once baby came, he has asked for milk a few times. And so I was like, I contemplated it. I was like, should I give him some milk? And I didn't. I told him no. But even still, sometimes I'm like, it would just be so much easier to put him back on. I was like, but then I have to go through that weaning process again.
Right. I know.
I'm like, we're already past it. So let's just kind of keep it where it is.
Right.
One thing that I highly recommend, I feel like when I was newly postpartum too, I was always constantly looking for the right nursing bra or like nursing tank and stuff. I finally found one that I like and I rave about it, even though like, I don't get any kickbacks from it, but I love the nursing tank from Target that has the built-in breastfeeding cups because so many of our like of those nursing tanks have the removable cups. And it's so annoying. I just end up like throwing them away. So the nursing tank from Target is like my staple that I wear that I can just nurse on the go and just pull up my normal t-shirt or whatever top I have and use that. So that's all.
Oh, that's a great tip. If you want to send me a link, I'll
I think I have a reel too. You can always share.
Oh, cool. Okay, yeah, send me the reel and I can put it in the show notes or I'll share it on my stories too. Well, as we're closing out, is there one piece of advice that you would give to moms, other moms that are in the thick of it?
Even before they get to the thick of it, I think being prepared, like and kind of getting some of that information ahead of time, having a lactation consultant on speed dial, and just having the support from your partner and whoever's around you. Make it known what your desire is so that they are there to encourage you when time gets tough, because they're going to get tough. And you want to know that you have their support rather than just, here's the bottle, here's the formula, just do it. And if it's needed, absolutely you can go that way. But if your desire is to exclusively breastfeed, make sure that you have that understanding with you and your partner, because you want the most support, whether it be lactation consultant, your partner, or even some of those breastfeeding supports groups. Those were all huge and big factors to having a successful breastfeeding relationship.
Yeah, great. Thanks. And I'm sure that people who are listening and hear how successful you were in your journey and hearing about the fun reels you have and everything, they want to know how to connect with you. So where can people connect with you if they want to learn more from you?
So on Instagram and TikTok, I am at lindsay.ser. So LINDSAY.SSER, which is the beginning of my last name. And then on Facebook, I'm actually L Chapin, CHAPIN1, which I probably should change and update to everything else. But that was my maiden name and I started Facebook so long ago.
I know. Yeah.
And then in my link in my bios, I have some link trees of my favorite products and things like that. So
great. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your 3 incredible stories. And it's so empowering for people to hear, even though this isn't a birth-centered podcast, to hear stories such as emergency C-sections, VBACs, various birth settings, and to hear that even if it is a C-section or a premature birth, that the milk will still come. The milk can still come, especially if you've done your research and empowered yourself or getting early formula supplementation does not have to mean the end of your breastfeeding journey, that you can still take control and take power over that situation and lean into your intuition and find your support systems to have the journey that you would like to have. And I say that knowing that there are people who do everything right and it still doesn't go the way they want it to. So if you are one of those people, I hear you, I validate your experience, and it's still so great to hear a story like yours where you did all the things, you found the right support, and it went the way that you wanted it to, despite having those early hiccups. And then you got that amazing birth experience you did always want at the end. So I just love that for you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
I love when I meet with clients who know what they want and are just working with me to figure out the best ways to get there. I'm so happy to help clients meet their individual goals because that shows that they have stepped into their power and have figured out what is right for their family. And I love that Lindsay shares this story of working to get to her goals and not being swayed by providers who were trying their best to be helpful, but might not have always been the most helpful in the moment in those earliest postpartum days. If you are looking for a group of people who want to talk about the barriers that we discussed here in this episode that present themselves while feeding our babies, that make baby feeding so difficult, please join my Milk Making Minutes community group. I can't wait to see you there. And if you are looking for a way to decrease your stress during pregnancy or in the postpartum period, go to www.feastandfettle.com and use my code MILKMILK to get $30 off your first week of meals. You have so much to choose from. They're so delicious. Just let somebody else do the cooking for you so that you can take one more thing off your plate. Bye.